Okay, it's been a while, but we're back. Uh, Welcome to the Representing Rural podcast by Rural Community Alliance. And it's election season. We're deep into election season. How many days do we have now to election?
Oh no, you're putting me on the spot.
It's less than 50, right?
It's less than 50.
Yeah, it's less than 50. So we have had a lot of I don't know the word to use, but we've had a lot of things going on as far as ballot issues are concerned in the state of Arkansas for this election. So we have, I mean, she's an expert to me because she just knows all things elections as it pertains to Arkansas. So I don't think there's anyone better that I could have come on and break some things down for us. So welcome to Kristin
Yeah.
Higgins from the extension for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for giving us your time. So we'll get right into it. So, what are the main ballot issues for Arkansas to consider this election?
We had several citizen initiatives, going out for the past couple of months. You might have seen a lot of people over the summer out collecting signatures. And so, what ended up on the ballot as of today, because there are some court challenges. So, as of today, we have one ballot issue from the state legislature, and then we have two citizen initiatives. And all three, interestingly, are something that voters have voted on within the past 15 years. So these should ring a bell. You should be a little familiar with it, but if not, that's okay. We understand, 15 years can be a long time for, it seems like a blink of an eye, but then you're like, oh, yeah, we did do that. Okay. So from the legislature, we have a constitutional amendment that's asking voters to approve extending scholarships that are funded by the state lottery to students who attend vocational or technical institutes. So right now, the Constitution says that the funding from like the extra money left over after you pay winners of lottery tickets, that can go to scholarships for students attending 2 and 4 year public and private schools in Arkansas. So, the community colleges, the 4 year colleges, if you're attending those, you're likely, probably receiving a scholarship that's funded from the lottery sales. And the issue one is saying, let's do the same thing, but let's do it for technical and vocational schools. So there's not a definition of what a technical or vocational school is in the proposed amendment. And so it's anticipated that legislators would come back in 2025 and flesh out some additional details of where this money could go, how it could be spent, what types of degrees or what types of certificates that would qualify for this funding. So there's not a lot of breakdown in this proposal, but like I said, it's anticipated that legislators will come back and do that at a future time if voters approve issue one.
Wow.
Issue two, deals with casinos. So do y'all remember voting on casinos a couple years ago? Voters approved an amendment that would establish 4 casino locations in Arkansas and determine what would happen with excess tax and revenue from that. So there are people who are back for issue two. Sponsors want to remove Pope County from the Constitution as a casino gaming license. So issue two would, if approved, would repeal the license that has been issued for Pope County near Russellville for a casino over there. And it would also say that any future casino licenses, if voters approved more at a later date, that they would also have to have local approval in a countywide election for those casinos. And then issue three deals with medical marijuana. And so it wasn't too long ago that voters approved creating a medical marijuana program in the state. And so this proposal, it would do a lot of things to expand the program. So it doesn't get rid of medical marijuana. It doesn't change the number of dispensaries or the number of growers in the state. All that stays the same, along with the tax, like what happens to the tax revenue. All that would stay the same. So what issue three would do is it would say that more healthcare professionals could meet with a patient and determine whether or not they would benefit from medical marijuana. So right now, if you go and seek a medical marijuana card, you can go to a doctor and that's it. So this would say registered nurses, it would say physician assistants and pharmacists could meet with somebody and determine if they would benefit from the use of marijuana. And so they would sign the paperwork that the person would then take to the Department of Health to apply for a medical marijuana card.
Wow.
So this proposal would also say, in addition to the 18 medical conditions that are listed in the Constitution right now that qualify you for a medical marijuana card, that anything your healthcare provider thinks that, like if you have something that they think that you would benefit from. So for example, there's dementia on the list, but maybe you have a different type of health issue that's not on the list, but that they still think that you would benefit from the use. So it would expand the types of conditions that people could qualify for that card. It would also say that you could, if you have a medical marijuana card, or if you have a designated caregiver who helps you and they're registered with the state, that you could grow up to 14 marijuana plants at home of various sizes. So from like seed to flower, so that you could have one consistently growing. And then that way, the thought is that you don't go to a dispensary and buy marijuana, that you have some at home that's accessible to you. So it would allow for at-home growing of marijuana for people who have a medical marijuana card with the Arkansas Department of Health. And the proposal would also say that your card is good for 3 years instead of 1 year. So every year right now, someone with a medical marijuana card has to go back to the doctor, has to be certified, has to reapply and pay a $50 copay, or I'm sorry, not a copay, a $50 application fee. Mm-hmm. And so this would say no more application fee, and it would make your card good for 3 years instead of 1 year. And then it would also allow you to use telehealth. Right now, you can use telehealth to visit with lots of different types of doctors for different issues. With the pandemic, it kind of opened up the use of telehealth. And if you have a medical marijuana card right now, you can use telehealth to meet with that provider to get your card renewed. But you have to go see that provider in person for that first visit. So this would say even first visits you can do over telehealth. So there's a lot of other different things it would do. There's language in there about advertising. There's very specific language in the Constitution, and this would say, let's take out that specific Constitution and make it more general and put it in the hands of the Arkansas Alcoholic Beverage Control Division to make some of these rules. So they anticipate advertising changes. They anticipate, even though packaging would still be child-proof or prevent children from accessing a toxic amount of marijuana, the exact language that's in there would change to be more general. And then finally, Candace, even though this is the medical marijuana amendment, there is a portion in there that deals with all constitutional amendments. There is a section that would say that the legislature could not change any constitutional amendment without another vote of the people. And so that would be a big change. And that's in there. And right now, the legislature can make changes to constitutional amendments if they have enough votes to do so. However, it's kind of like a legal gray area. They haven't really done that much. There are proposals that say specifically, or there are amendments as well that say specifically the legislature can change this section, but not this section. So like the marijuana amendment that was passed a couple of years ago, the legislators have very specific permission that they can change certain sections. So what this proposal would do is say no more changes to this amendment and no more changes to any other amendment unless you specifically have permission to do so without taking it back to the voters for voter approval for those changes. So I know that was a whole lot, real quick.
Okay, so we have the casino, lottery, marijuana.
Yes, and that's it. So all issues that voters have voted on since 2008. So that's kind of interesting. It's interesting this year because there's not like a new issue. It's all something that voters have already voted on, have already approved. And the reason why it's coming back is because any changes need to be approved by the voters.
Okay. So the other initiatives, which I don't even want to speak of because I don't want to confuse anyone, but some were challenged, some didn't, get the required signature. So could you just remind people of the signature that change that happened during the last legislative session?
Right. So last year, the Arkansas legislature passed a law increasing the number of counties where voter signatures must come from. So previously, it was you needed a certain amount of signatures from at least 15 counties. And that at least that's in the Constitution. The legislature said, well, that shows that that there's a floor, but not a ceiling to the number of counties that we can require signatures from. So they passed a law saying that signatures must come from at least 50 of the state's 75 counties. So we saw citizen initiative groups, go out, collect signatures. The majority of them, were able to get to that 50. There was one or two that didn't get to the 50 and didn't submit their signatures to the Secretary of State's office because they knew that they just didn't have it. But then there were other ones that did make it, but were disqualified over some technical issues with the paperwork, not the signatures themselves, but the paperwork about the canvassers who go out and collect the signatures. And that's a result of changes in state law, changes in how canvassing laws have changed over the past decade to require canvassers to have background checks, to require canvassers to be Arkansas citizens. And then that's even opened up a whole can of worms of like, well, what is a citizen when it comes to canvassing? So there's a lot of behind the scenes before things even get on the ballot.
Yes, a lot of I know for some organizations, they see it as being harder for like smaller groups that don't have a lot of outside dollars to get to have that manpower on the ground trying to work to get those ballots, to get those signatures.
Well, and it's not even just the signatures now, it's the paperwork, the technical details of making sure all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. And if you're not savvy in that area, or if you don't have an attorney, sometimes it can be a little bit more cumbersome or cause you like forced errors essentially.
Does the state provide any, I guess, training around there for groups that want to come and propose, do the work to get something on the ballot, or are they just saying, hey, you want to do it, you got to learn what you can and what's needed yourself? Does the
I'm
state?
not familiar. Yeah, I'm not familiar with any formal trainings, but they do put out a publication about how the process works.
Okay. It'll be for me, I guess, because I don't even understand all the ins and outs. Just, from the outside, trying to figure out like why certain initiatives, well, I know one in particular, the signatures were deemed invalid. So I get, for me, like I would want to know, hey, what exactly goes on in that decision making? What does that organization need to do for that? So if trends from these, since not since you, but since these issues have been things we voted on as a state in the past, what do trends tell us, or is there something that you want to even speak on regarding the issues?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't know if we have any trends to pull, like to compare to, but I think it's interesting because this might be one of the few times since I've been paying attention for more than a decade that we've seen something recently voted on come back. So, I mean, that's kind of what the interesting thing is about this year is this is something that voters have already approved. So when I'm out there talking about medical marijuana in issue 3, I have to remind people you're not voting on whether to approve medical marijuana. Like that has already been approved. It's already part of the state constitution. You're voting on changes to the program. And if you vote against it, the program is still there. So just trying to refresh people's memories that you're not voting on whether to create casinos. You're not voting on whether to create a lottery. That is already there. You're voting on changes. And, Arkansas is one of 15 states where citizens have the ability to go out and collect signatures to propose constitutional amendments, to propose state laws, and to propose veto referendums. So we call that direct democracy. And so that has been in play in Arkansas for more than 100 years now, and it's an important process. So some things get bogged down in the technical issues, but once things make the ballot, I encourage people take the time to go over and look at what the policy questions are and what the decisions are, because your decisions have long-lasting impact. You might not remember who you voted for 10 years from now. You might not remember how you voted on a ballot issue, but those have long-lasting impacts. All you have to do is, pick up the newspaper or look at the paper online and see a lot of these stories go back to constitutional amendments or state laws that voters decided themselves. So this is a situation where your vote really does matter.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be one of the 15. I hope that's something that we're able to continue to hold on to. So I know when bills are proposed in the legislature, and these issues aren't bills, but they have fiscal impacts. Are there any projected that you know of, like fiscal impacts for any of these amendments passing?
There's not any official fiscal impact. So the one from the legislature did not list any, didn't have a study associated with it. So that's something that the Bureau of Legislative Research would have put together, or with the help of DFA. But so there's not anything that's listed. When it comes to money, if you look at issue 2, that involves the construction of a casino. So if that casino is built, there's a financial impact. If the casino isn't built, there's a financial impact. And we don't have any dollar amounts on that. With issue 3, the medical marijuana program, there's a couple different potential financial impacts. So eliminating the $50 application fee, that raises several $1,000,000 a year for the state. That goes to fund the state's administrative work in the medical marijuana program. And then some of the remaining dollars goes along with the tax dollars to fund various programs in the state. The state hasn't been able to give me any type of information on, we would have to cut this, or we would have to do this differently. There's not been a lot of information out there. And actually it was pretty difficult even getting how much that amounted to per year, because the focus is usually on the sales tax or the special taxes that are charged on marijuana sales, and not the application fee. But we do know it'll be several $1,000,000 a year that would be eliminated. And then there's the potential impacts. Again, no dollar figures associated with what would happen if people are growing marijuana at home versus going to dispensaries to buy it, because there wouldn't be as much sales tax revenue. Now, they would be buying those seeds or plants from the dispensaries in the state. So there's that type of sales process that would be taxed. And then also, I forgot to mention this, but the issue 3, as part of the proposal, it says that if the federal government ever decriminalizes marijuana, that the growers that are currently licensed with the state and the dispensaries that are licensed through the state could then sell wholesale and retail. So there's that possibility as well for future financial impact.
Okay. Wow. I guess I didn't realize that many people in the state were I guess enrolled, I don't know the correct term, for us to have
They have
several.
a card. Yes. So there's about 105,000 people in
Wow.
Arkansas who have a medical marijuana card at the moment, and they live in every county in the state. There's not a county without a person who has a medical marijuana card.
So I guess another question for me is, so what, and I've heard, I think not Detroit, Michigan, they allow people to grow, if I'm not mistaken. So are there any, I guess in the same vein of trainings, or any standards that they have to meet in order to grow at home, or is it just they can only grow that amount?
Right. So you have to have a medical marijuana card. So that would require you going to the doctor or the registered nurse or the physician assistant or pharmacist and them saying, yes, you do have a condition that they think that you would benefit from the use of marijuana. We don't say prescribe because it's still illegal federally. So you can't prescribe something that's illegal. So we say certified. So you'd have to have that doctor's appointment, fill out the application for the medical marijuana card, and then yes, you can then grow up to 14 plants at home. Now let's say you have like 4 or 5 people in your household that also have medical marijuana cards. You're still limited to 14, so it doesn't multiply. You can't have like, oh, everybody with a card can get 14. It's 14 by the household. Yeah, I see you laughing there. But so various different cycles. Again, it says 7 smaller plants and 7 larger plants.
I don't even know what that means, but that's good for people that do know what it means. So just to be able to break it down, is so on our ballots, the ballots have been approved, right, for each county now, right?
Right. So the Secretary of State has sent the official state ballot to all the counties. All the counties have their ballots set. They're, programming voting machines. They're sending out absentee ballots. So all of that, they're sending stuff to the military members who are overseas. All of that is set. But issue 2 does have a challenge in court. The Arkansas Supreme Court is looking at that challenge to decide whether or not it'll stay on the ballot. So opponents of removing the casino license for Pope County say that the ballot title is misleading. They say that the ballot title didn't tell voters the full story. So, for example, the impact of removing the license. Then they also say that the canvassers who went out and collected signatures did so without telling voters what the proposal would do. However, there was a special judge who reviewed all these claims, except for the ballot title, the misleading ballot title issue. The Supreme Court's looking at that. But the special master looked at the number of signatures. They looked at the claims that people weren't properly told what it would do, and he dismissed all of those charges. And he said about 6,000 signatures wouldn't be counted because of technical issues with the canvassers. So, for example, they might not live in Arkansas. They might have their addresses might not match. So between the paperwork that they submitted to be a canvasser and paperwork for tax documents, that the addresses don't match. So they disqualified, or the special judge disqualified 6,000 roughly signatures. But the group still has enough to qualify for the ballot. And so the special judge's findings go to the Supreme Court, and there will be briefs filed over the next couple of weeks. So it'll probably be October some point before a decision is made whether issue 2 stays on the ballot. And the Supreme Court hasn't ruled on the ballot title question itself. So that's in court. Issue 3, we are speaking, mid-September. And the Secretary of State's office is still counting signatures for this proposal. You have to have at least, let's say, about 91,000 voter signatures, which is dependent on the number of people who voted for governor. It's 10% of the people who voted for governor in the last election. The group that wants issue 3 to pass submitted their signatures in July, and they had you have to go back and remember that there was a previous constitutional amendment that voters approved that said a ballot issue group can get extra time to collect more voter signatures if they had at least 75% of the required amount. So they received additional time. They went out, they collected about 38,000 more signatures and turned that in right before Labor Day. So we're waiting on the Secretary of State to say, yes, they have enough signatures, but because the date fell beyond the time frame for them to send out the official ballot, they had to put it on the ballot. So if there's enough signatures, your votes count. If there's not enough signatures, then any vote for or against will not count. And we don't know where we're at yet on issue 3, but we're going out and educating and sharing information, working on our voter guide as if it's on the ballot, because that's what people see. They hear it. So they, we're educating about it as much as we can. And then If the state determines it doesn't qualify for the ballot, we'll say, hey, this one doesn't qualify. You can ignore everything we've been telling you.
It doesn't matter. Okay, so before I, get the final clarity for everyone around what a for or against vote means, I've been keeping up with you on social media, and it seems to be a lot going on around some counties not wanting um the machines for the ballot. They're moving to paper ballots. So could you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. So there is a movement to have Arkansas voters go back to the way they had voted possibly in the past. So ever since the mid 2000s, more and more Arkansas counties have moved to electronic voting machines. So where you have a piece of paper, you insert it into the machine, you make your choices, and then you get that piece of paper back, and then you insert it into a counter that counts the votes. So there's something called like the paper ballot and hand count proposal. And they had tried statewide, but they didn't get very far statewide. So they went to about 9 counties and submitted the same proposal as a local ballot issue. And in all 9 counties, the county clerks said, no, this, you don't have enough signatures, or your ballot title is misleading, or you used out of state residents to collect voter signatures. The law on the books in Arkansas says you have to be an Arkansas resident to do the signature gathering. And so the sponsors filed a lawsuit in all 9 counties. And in 2 of those counties, the judge, who was the same judge for both counties, ordered that the signatures be counted. And in one of those counties, the decision was made within enough time for it to actually go on the ballot. So one county, Independence County, will be voting in November on whether or not to have hand counting of ballots, and those ballots being paper marked with pen. So, like I mentioned, right now, I'm not exactly familiar with that county's process, but if it follows other counties, again, you get a blank long sheet of paper, you stick it in, you make your choices on a machine, it spits it out, and then you take that paper and you feed it into a counting machine. So that proposal would say, no more of that. Here's your piece of paper, here's your pen, and we're going to hand count it.
Okay. So that would mean you would need more poll workers and all of that.
Yeah, I don't have a financial impact of that, but we were just asked to work with that county on a fact sheet to explain the proposal. So that's something I'll be digging into in the next couple of days. But the supporters of this say they believe that the hand counting and the hand voting is more trustworthy. They have concerns about the electronic machines being tampered with. They have concerns about the counting machines being tampered with, and they think that doing it by hand makes it more trustworthy. Whereas the clerk and everybody else involved in elections say this is very safe. There's never been any questions. The state did an audit of various counties, not including the one that it's going to be on the ballot, but they did an audit of the paperwork, and they didn't find any issues with those counties. But then they did find issues with the one county in the state that has opted to use hand counting.
I reside in a county that for the past few or maybe couple elections, we've been under a microscope, Phillips County. And I know the election commission, they'll have watchers here.
Observers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But there are other counties in the state as well that'll have them, right?
Right. The only other one that comes off the top of my head is Jefferson County, but I know that there's a couple other counties too that will have observers from the state there.
And does that mainly come from because I know it was a couple elections ago, we were so late with getting in that last count. So is that typically where it comes from when they have observers, on the ground?
I'm not as familiar with that process, but I know that recently it's more so counties where they've had lots of questions or concerns, and they want to make sure that they have someone on site. But I don't know their official parameters for how they decide which county has an observer.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting times around here. So thank you again for giving me your time today. So just a final roll down of what does a for vote means for each one of them and what does an against vote mean.
Okay, sure. So issue one with the lottery scholarships. So a for vote means that you support adding in technical and vocational schools to the Constitution to be eligible for receiving lottery scholarship funds. An against vote means that you don't want to make any changes, that you want it to stay where lottery scholarships are only for 4-year and 2-year colleges and universities in the state. Issue two, regarding the Pope County casino license and future elections, a for vote means that you want to remove the license from the Constitution for Pope County to have a casino and void the license that has been issued to a company to run a casino there. It also means that you want the quorum court in the county to call for a special election for a countywide vote on any future casino locations. That would require a future constitutional amendment to approve more locations in the state. So a for vote means you want 3 locations in the Constitution, you remove Pope County, and you call for future elections for those locations to be approved locally. An against vote means you don't want to change the Constitution. You want to leave the Pope County casino license in there. You want to have those 4 locations. And that you don't want a countywide vote in the future if there's additional casino locations approved. Issue 3, a for vote means that you want to expand the Arkansas medical marijuana program. You want to expand who can certify people for medical marijuana cards. You want to allow people with medical marijuana cards to grow up to 14 plants at home. You want to remove the application fees, expand how long the card is good for, or extend the validity of the card. You want to change advertising requirements, change packaging requirements, and that you recognize if there's ever a federal decriminalization that marijuana can be sold at wholesale and retail, so recreational marijuana. It also means that you would be in favor of prohibiting the legislature from making any changes to future constitutional amendments without another vote of the people. An against vote means you don't want to change anything. You want it to stay the way it is, that what the state has its medical marijuana program in place with no changes to healthcare professionals or expanding the conditions or allowing for home growing or changing advertising or packaging restrictions. It also means that you would be against changing the Constitution to require legislators having another vote of the people. It's a very long list there. So come read our voter guide or come read our fact sheet. You can read the full text of all 3 proposals at our website, which is uaex.uada.edu/ballot. You can find more information there, along with what a for vote means and what an against vote means.
And when she says it's a thorough explanation, she means it. She does a great job with making sure that all of these things are broken down so you understand them. So thank you for that service that you do for our citizens of this state. It's something we need. And you all, please go to their website because it's an awesome resource for all things elections, public policy in Arkansas. Thank you again, Kristin. So
thank you.
Try to stay out of this rain and enjoy the rest of your Monday.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.